Who got the lowest voice? Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all so much for coming. Welcome to the celebration of the life and legacy of Senator Reverend Dr. McKinley Washington Jr. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here in this building, in this space. This auditorium is named after Senator Washington for all the work that he did as a legislator to ensure that this building will be preserved. So for those who are new to this space, this is the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture. It was once the Avery Institute. So it was a school for African Americans. So just a couple things. This building opened in 1868. So this building has been standing since 1868. We became a high school in 1947, and then we eventually became the Avery Research Center in the 90s. So we tell people that while you're here, please place your hands on the brick. And, you know, the pillars are original, the brick is original to the building. So understanding you're on sacred ground. The other thing that I also wanted to add is that we're an archive, a museum, and a library. So some of our staff are here today, and I am so grateful for those individuals because we couldn't do it without them. So one is Miss Aisha Heichel, who is our manager of archival services. I don't see her, but Brittany Washington, I don't know where Brittany is, but Brittany Washington had us on a yellow dress. She's our new outreach and public programming coordinator. Lauren Curry is an undergraduate student. She greeted you at the front door. And then we also have Darren Lee Calhoun II, who has been running around. He is our outreach and public programming coordinator, and he wears like 900 other hats. We want to say thank you to Darren. Because what we've been so fortunate to have is an impromptu exhibit. So when you leave this room and you go down the hallway in the Cox Gallery, we have some memorabilia, some beautiful archival documents from Mrs. Beulah Washington, alongside some items that we have here at Avery. And we've created an installation about Reverend Washington. So please, you know, if you're waiting on your book to get signed and on your way out, please make sure you check out our exhibit. Darren, Patricia, and Lauren, as well as the rest of our staff, work very diligently in putting that exhibit together. And we're so grateful to have that there. The other thing I wanted to add is that that exhibit is just temporary. So if you'd like to help us make it permanent, that means that we would need to acquire more materials. So if you have materials related to the life and legacy of Reverend Washington, please have a conversation with me or Aisha. We can set up emails and conversations to think about donating. So those materials will now live here for individuals who want to research his life, learn more about his work beyond the book, can do so here in real time. So without further ado, there's a couple of people I want to shout out. So Avery staff, there's only 7 of us. Savannah Frierson is not here, but she is part of our team. Erica Veal is our archivist. So is Georgette Mayo as well. And then we have Patricia Washington, who is not here, and ironically is from Sumter. So that's where she is right now with her family, and she's working with us over the summer. So with that said, I'm going to take a moment and invite up our moderator for this afternoon's event. Reverend Patricia Jones, come to the stage. So Reverend Patricia Blygen Jones has a Bachelor of Arts in English from Morris College and a Master of Divinity from Erskine Theological Seminary. She served 9 years as ruling elder at St. James Presbyterian Church. She was installed and ordained on September 23rd, 2018, making her the fourth pastor and first woman pastor of Hebron Zion Presbyterian Church located on Johns Island. She is a member of Gamma Xi Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the Charleston Atlantic Presbyterian chapter of the National Black Presbyterian Caucus, and the Charleston Area Justice Ministry. She is wife to Carl Jones and mother to Avery Jordan and Peyton Lay. She is also the creator and host of She Speaks Too, which is a podcast. We have an episode that she was also able to do with Reverend Washington. It is available on all streaming platforms in June of 2020. So I'd like to welcome up the best person to do this job to moderate is Reverend Jones.
Thank you all so much for being here. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to moderate today's panel discussion. We hope that you all are ready, and we're going to just ask some really cool questions to some people who knew Reverend Washington very well. And so we hope that you get some new insight on him as far as his work in the community, as well as his work in life, just his personal life. So without further ado, we're going to ask our panelists to come up, starting with Mrs. Beulah J. Washington. Next, Mr. Elijah Washington, the brother of the Reverend Dr. McKinley Washington. Next up, we have the Reverend Dr. Donnie Woods. Dr. Woods is honorably retired as the General Presbyter of Charleston Atlantic Presbytery here in Charleston, South Carolina. And are we missing a person? No, we're fine, good. Get you clipped up. Get you to hold that. All right, so let's get started. Mrs. Washington, we're going to start with you. You were married to Reverend Washington for nearly 60 years?
Correct.
All right, so we want to know from you, what was it like being married to someone who was so driven to serve others?
First, let me say thank you to each person that's present here today. And I want you to know I appreciate you coming so much. What's this being like married to McKinley Washington Jr.?
Okay.
Now, do you have all day with me?
Not all day, but a little time.
Okay. McKinley grew up in Maysville, South Carolina, 8 children. He's the 3rd child of 8. And he was one of those that was outspoken. He didn't always do what they asked him to do. He always felt that he had to go further and do other things. He attended Goodwill Elementary School, and he went to Johnson C. Smith University. And when he finished high school, he did not fill out an application for Johnson C. Smith. He went and told his pastor he would like to go to college. And the pastor got busy and sent him right on the bus to Johnson C. Smith. Didn't know whether he was going to get in there or not. Told him to go see Reverend George. And so he went to see Reverend George. And Reverend George, after that, made things happen for him. He got a job and started working, got on the choir, and started doing so many different things. Of course, he graduated from high school valedictorian of his class, and he was also captain of his football team and other clubs. He was president of everything. He liked being up front, and I think all of you all know that by now. And he attended seminary at Johnson C. Smith Seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's where we met. I was a student at Barbara Scotia College, and he was at Johnson C. Smith. He was in seminary when we met. And he got a call to be a student pastor at Edisto Presbyterian Church. Of course, it was 3 churches, but he was called to Edisto and then St. Paul and Faith Presbyterian churches. And he took on all 3 of those churches. So before we got married, he told me, I'm just going to go there and stay 2 years and we're going to move on. Well, those 2 years are not here yet. But anyway, it's been a great journey. And he got involved in politics years ago. I think Mr. Clement, Dr. Bell, you can help me with that name. Clement. Yeah. Had a place on the island, and he came out and talked to him. So he got involved in politics there. And the first rodeo of his were the state park on Edisto Island. He helped to, what was it with that? State park.
To integrate it.
Integrate the state park on Edisto Island. And from that, he went on doing other things, became a representative and senator, and you know all about that. And he continued to work in the community, not only on the Sea Islands, but everywhere he goes, he felt that he had to be up front and working.
But was that challenging for you at times? Was that challenging?
Yes, it was. And it wasn't, because I was sort of involved myself in doing things on the island and the Sea Islands as well. But it wasn't so much of a challenge for me, because we always talked about what's going on, and he was just so involved, and I was happy to see him being happy with what he was doing.
Thank you. Great. That's great. Great. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Elijah, tell us about your brother. Let's talk about his childhood. What was he like? Could you see this for him?
Well, he had all the possibilities because, like she said, Mac was always aggressive. The other thing she said, Mac always thought he knew everything. And coming up, and him and Daddy would get into a lot of challenges. You know, Mac is junior, Daddy was senior, so he would tell Daddy a lot of things and what to do. Daddy would always tell Mom and everybody else that that boy's so educated till he's fooled. But growing up, he was aggressive. Always, I remember that every car that Daddy got, he tore it up. He always drive fast, and it's always was athletic, and I sort of patterned my life a little bit after him, because everything he said he could do, I tried my best to break it when I came along. He bragged a lot. We went to Eastern High School that he set the high school record on the basketball team for scoring 40 points in a game. So when I got to Eastern High School, I told the coach I had to score 42 points a game, and I did. So he didn't like that, me breaking his record. But he was a lot of fun growing up. The other thing that you didn't know, Mac had a natural ability to catch a snake. He could catch a snake by the tail and run every girl in the community completely crazy. I mean, Dad used to yell at him. He would get with Virginia and Catherine. They would be in the house, and all of a sudden he would catch a black snake. He'd run in the house, and they'd break out the house. And the school was right behind him with that snake until Daddy caught up with him and made him put the snake down and kill the snake. But he was always adventurous. And that adventure turned him into why we are here today.
And fearless too.
Really.
Yeah.
Picking up a snake by the tail.
Yeah.
Yeah, fearless.
He could sneak up behind a snake and grab him by the tail and keep running. And that's why he was so fast. He was really fast. He could speed it. Even when I got to Johnson Smith University, he went out for the football team, and he didn't make the football team because he got his shoulder cracked on some of on the freshman year. He played. The coach McGirt told me that, are you fast as your brother? I said, not quite, because he said Mac came out one play, ran up to the line and went left, and they didn't know which direction. It was so quick on his feet to move, but growing up, he was a lot of like idol in the family. We tried to be like him. I had other brothers too, and they had great characters. I have brother Dennis and I was there. And the brother Richard was the family cook. And all the boys, I was the youngest one, sometime on Sunday. You know, back in them days, down in Alexander probably would know, back in those days, see, the preachers got first class.
Right.
So we had this preacher named Reverend Johnson from a line of Presbyterian Church. Reverend Johnson knew that my mama could cook and looked like every Sunday around dinner time. We lived down a dusty road. We could see the dust coming down the road. It was Reverend Johnson coming for dinner. And Reverend Johnson was a big guy. And all the boys were sitting at the table. I was the smallest one. And Reverend Johnson would be eating so fast he'd be sweating. And Mama would be fanning, and Mama would make one of the boys get up and fan him while he was eating. Yeah, we hated Reverend Johnson. So we came up, when McKinley, they came up, the older guys came up with a scheme because my younger brother Richard could cook. Because Mama taught all the boys, y'all got to cook them. They don't even like, y'all don't know what y'all gonna get. So this particular Sunday, all the boys in the community, because houses were closed, decided to come up with a scheme to stay home and not go to church. Everybody was sick. And so when Mama was over at the church, Richard killed about 2 or 3 of the chicken. We all ate good.
Oh my gosh.
Before they came back from church. And this particular Sunday, we said, we don't care if Reverend Johnson come at 1,000 miles an hour. We wasn't worried about nothing. We'd already been full by eating the food. But anyway, I'm not going to tell the story about the church.
Yeah, don't tell the story. Yeah, hold that
I'm
one.
going to pass that one.
Well, tell us a little bit about his faith formation though, growing up.
Well, growing up, if you look at our family, I think we all have spiritual names. Elijah, James, McKinley, Richard, Ezekiel, the boys, and Ben, Benjamin, names from the Bible. Mom was very spiritual. We all went to, if the church door was open, we all had to be in it. And so that's where he started his grounding, right there in the church in Maysville with Reverend George. There was a pastor before Reverend George, I can't think of his name right now. But we all was spiritually coming up, and we all went to Sunday school, Bible school, church retreat, the summer church camp. They don't do that much anymore, but we all went to church camp. And I think Mama instilled in us the faith, trust in the Almighty God.
What do you miss about him the most?
What I don't miss about him is riding with him. If McKinley would drive 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, he was a fast driver. I'll give you that. Yeah.
100 miles an hour, and I would ride with him, and I would be instantly quiet. Not because of him, but being afraid of him driving. Because Mac at a habit, he'd be driving 100 miles an hour, and you say something to him, and he say, "What are you talking about?" Oh my God! We would go on a trip, and even then, my sister was here would tell you, when we get to the, I would just think I had to go to the bathroom, just so we could stop and I could get on the steering wheel, take the key from him. But and he liked to drive on empty. All right, Bill?
Correct.
On empty. We got another 50 miles to a service station, and the T is on empty. He swear we're gonna make it. Back to the car stop. You don't want to go walk. I'm not walking. But it never stopped. Yeah, but those are some things.
That's why Alonzo learned to drive like that.
Alonzo, I'm scared to ride with Alonzo.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Woods, Talk to us about Reverend Washington's contributions to Charleston Atlantic Presbytery as an ordained minister.
Well, he was, when I came in the early, in the late 90s, 1998, he was the kind of the elder statesman, so to speak, and kind of the mentor for all of us who came up in that generation of pastors, as I said the last time, the Black clergy recruitment and all of that. And he looked out for us in this presbytery in terms of making sure that there was integrity in our work, to make sure that we were committed and we kept our skills sharp, and that we were not preachers so much as pastors who needed to understand the importance of home visitation, hospital visitation, and all of those things that, you know, that go to the heart of what being a good pastor is all about. And I don't know that there is something about the wisdom of our leaders like Reverend Washington that can always somehow kind of see within people in a way that I know myself in particular recognized that because of his fight in politics, his fight in the church with the civil rights movement and all of that, he by no means thought that it was going to be easy for us, particularly when presbyteries merged and all of that. And I can remember many times when I was really struggling. I didn't know that he even knew what I was going through, but he would always show up during those times and give me his wisdom as a result of, you know, dealing with Bakra and politics and in the church and in the community and all of that. Always very encouraging, never asked me to do anything that he would not do himself. And there were some hard fights along the way. There were a group of elders from the white church on Edisto who was going to make it their journey to send me back to Mississippi or somewhere. And McKinley showed up and said, you know, you don't need to worry about that. You're the leader of this presbytery, and the African American constituency stands with you and behind you. You do what God has called you to do, and we'll take care of the rest. And I can remember the many times when he would just show up and say, boy, don't you let these Bakra get you down. I mean, constantly he would say that, not necessarily in group settings, but always when it was just the two of us. He would ask me hard questions about, you know, this committee and that committee, and bring to that the wisdom of what he had experienced when the Presbyterians united and all of that. And was very influential in my work and in my life here. And I think he had that effect on all of us who were younger pastors, not just in the presbytery, but across the whole denomination. J. Herbert Nelson and all of us knew that when his strong voice spoke, we had to act, and we had to act with integrity.
What do you believe his legacy is in Charleston Atlantic Presbytery?
I think his legacy in Charleston Atlantic Presbytery goes to the heart of what it meant back in the early 90s of putting together a presbytery that was representative of all the people, all the churches, the rural churches, the city churches, all of those churches had a seat at the table, and their voices were heard in various ways. Of course, you make gains, and as a result of those gains, you lose some things. But when you look at the whole picture, one of the things that made my work a lot easier was because of the groundwork that had already been laid in fighting for the opportunity for lay people in the church to be moderator of presbytery, to serve, to be chairs of the various committees, and at the seat at the table where decisions about money and all that were being made. He helped me to think through that and make sure that that was always the case every year when we had to go through these battles. So I think he left that mark on all of us, particularly African-American clergy in this presbytery. And there is a sense in which folks were held accountable during my tenure. And I still hear the voices, his voice, through the voice of those who are in leadership positions now, saying that things ain't going back to the way they used to be.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Elijah, what do you believe Reverend Washington's legacy is in regard to your family?
I can say the one in a sentence. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. He believed in strong faith. I think that he has instilled that in each one of our nieces and nephews, especially his grandboys over there. So if we're faithful to God and faithful to one another, we all have the opportunity to be great. So my legacy in one word is grateful is thy faithfulness.
Thank you. Mrs. Washington, I pose the same question to you. What do you believe Reverend Washington's legacy is?
Okay, I believe that his legacy is that he leaves is that you continue doing the things that he taught you when he was here. He believed in everybody. No one could do wrong in his sight. He felt that everyone would be able to accomplish. If you set out to accomplish something, put your mind, your heart, and work hard, then you would be able to accomplish whatever you need. So he's still watching over us that we may do these things and to continue to go on with life.
Can you share with us something that was very challenging for him during his term in public service, his public life?
Well, he had several things that were challenging to him. But one thing that I'd like to speak about, one night we went to Walterboro to a banquet. He was a speaker there at the banquet. And they sent a note in to the person presided saying that he would not get home safe that night. And we had our children with us, and they had policemen around there. And they, instead of taking us home, if not sure, I think they took us to a hotel that night and whatnot, but nothing happened. But in the midst of all that, he didn't seem to be worried or very much concerned. He said, God will take care of us. And that was his belief. And he always said that God will take care of us, and he did. And there were other incidents as well that, happened along the way, but that was one of the ones that really stood out in my life.
Would you care to share with us the time that you all experienced the cross burning?
Well, we lived on Edisto Island at that time, and he had just started an organization over there. I don't think it was the NAACP. It was another organization. And when we, Sunday morning, he would always get up and go look around outside first before we get up. And when he got up this particular Sunday morning, he went out there, eggs had been scattered all over the cars and across in the yard, and some profanity written on some, I suppose, well, it wasn't some paper or something, saying that what would happen. But being fearless as he was, we went on to church, but he called some people. I can't remember the person's name he called in Columbia, but they came and kind of like staked out at the back of our house. And we had an idea who it was with some neighbors down the street. And sure enough, it was those neighbors, and they took care of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
You all endured a lot.
A great deal during those early years.
Were you ever tempted, or did you ever say to him, maybe he should not be as involved in the community as he was? Did you ever try to discourage him?
Never. I was there with him 100%. And I did because this was his calling and this is what he wanted to do. He felt that he could do this here and I would not stand in his way at all. I was there to help him 100% as much as I could.
Thank you for that. Let's give them a round of applause, everyone. Thank you all so much for your time and for sharing your reflections about Reverend Washington. I'm sure many of us have learned new things about Reverend Washington, his life and his work. And so at this time, we would like to recognize Reverend Washington's family, his siblings, his children, his daughter, and her children. Katrina, please stand up. Trey, Mr. Ben, William, am I missing? Tammy, Demetrius, all of Reverend Washington's family, Mrs. Washington and Reverend Washington's family, please stand. Thank you all so much for being here. What a beautiful legacy Reverend Washington has left behind. Thank you all so much for your time. At this time, we will end this portion of the book signing and proceed to the table in the corner. Yes.
If I might, if I might, before we get up, I listened to Eric Never said, I'm very inspired by it. One thing you said about your brother, I do want to point this out. My name is Alan. I grew up under McKinley in at St. Paul. He said he would grab a snake by the his entire time on the island, in the pulpit, and in the community. He's been grabbing snakes by the tail. He was never afraid of the snakes. And he had a lot of snakes. Not the one that crawled on the ground, but the one that sat beside him at the legislative table. One that sat beside him at council table. One who drove behind him. He was never, ever.
Amen. Thank you so much for that, Reverend Porter. Dr. Bell, we would like you to, Dr. Thaddeus John Bell, sir, would you please stand? We'd like for you to say a few words.
First of all, appreciation for being invited to be there.
Texted me last night to remind me that this program was going to be today. I was kind of reflecting on how I personally met McKinley. He called me from Columbia and asked me would I be his physician. I was aware that he already had a physician in Columbia because he was one of my classmates, and he told me that he was going to be moving back home and that he would like for me to take care of him. I was honored that that he called me and asked me to do that. I think the thing that I enjoyed mostly about McKinley is that he trusted my judgment. And I know for a man with his background, even though he was not a doctor, and had a lot of experience, was very well respected by a lot of people. For him to trust my medical judgment was very, very important to me. Oftentimes when he would come to see me and we would discuss his medical issues, but we would also discuss politics. I would always ask him kind of behind the scene questions that I knew that only he knew the answers to. He was a very good friend of Jim Clyburn. And oftentimes I would ask him, well, what does Jim think about this? And do you agree with him, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was always very, very inspiring for me to have a relationship with him and to get a chance to know him. It's not very frequently that patients of his stature will call you and ask you to be their physician. But I was very honored to take care of him. Got to know him very, very well. Always appreciated the relationship that he had with his wife. I'll tell you a story, and this is a very funny story. Of course, you hear me on television talking about various medical issues. Well, McKinley was having a stroke at home, and he didn't want to go to the hospital. And his wife said, listen, I heard Dr. Bell talk about strokes, and you are having the very, very symptoms that he described. And I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to call 911. And of course, she did. And of course, it saved McKinley's life. And so I told him, I said, listen, from here on out, you listen to your wife.
Mm-hmm.
So he said he would do that. But anyway, thank you very, very much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words about my friend McKinley Washington.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. We also would like to have a few words from Mr. Arnold Collins.
I'll speak from my seat if that's all right. I want to thank Ms. Washington for asking me to come. And I didn't know anything about the format. And if I did, I would have been able to have some specific things, historical things that I could present. But so I'm going to speak very briefly from my memory. Reverend Washington, I'm a personal recipient of his life and his legacy. I became a director of Charleston County Human Services Commission, which served the poor. He was on the board and he hired me. Prior to that, my other life, I was a vice president of a bank. I was the first African-American officer here in Charleston, and Reverend Washington and a number of the civil rights leaders, came to the bank, and I got to know them as a youngster. But here's what I want the young people to know and how his legacy is still helping us. I grew up in a segregated society. I never, my high school in '65, there was no integration. And when I came out of high school, and then the civil rights movement started around in the '60s. And President Johnson founded the War on Poverty, and the Head Starts and the community action agencies came out of that, out of President Johnson's initiatives. The Southern governors refused to accept the money from, they didn't want Head Start. They didn't want to accept the money for any low income people. And Reverend Washington, along with Gadney Howell's mother, Maybelle Howell, he drove Maybelle Howell, who was a very prominent white lady in this town. Everybody knew who she was. And she and McKinley went to Washington to receive the money for the Community Action Agency. And back in the 60s, for a Black man to be driving this woman from here to Washington to get the money, he put his life on the line. And that was the impetus for the Head Start Community Action in the Low Country. There are about 13 agencies in the state now. And so he was very, very instrumental. You heard about it. I didn't know about his religious life in terms of the family spoke about. I knew about the civic life, how it exposed me, how I got involved. And I became, like I said, I became the director. This was in the 70s when I first met him. He did this in 1965. I became the director in 1971, years later. So thousands of people are now getting the light bill, the Head Start, all those things as a result of Reverend Washington putting his life on the line to found these agencies. And I don't think the young kids knew that. And I wanted to let you all know. I personally benefited because I became a director. So it personally benefited my life. But we serve thousands of people. And so my hat's off to his family.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Thank you so much for sharing your reflections. Now we have a school board trustee, Charleston County School Board trustee, Dr. Carol Temple.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to honor Reverend McKinley Washington. He's someone I knew. He's someone who supported me in all the efforts that I've tried to do in public education. And I really appreciate that. And I think what we've heard today is his legacy. His legacy must be continued. There are still many things that have not been accomplished yet that still need the work of each and every one of us. So I want to put out this charge because I think he would, in his robust, deep voice, say that you all must carry on the work that he has done, because he's laid the foundation. He's broken a lot of barriers, and we need him so much. His spirit, his legacy, his ideas, his values in our society right now. So thank you so much for letting me give a few words of tribute to him. He's somebody I admire. Ms. Washington is, we've been friends for a long time. And I really appreciate the work that he's done. And as I said, we all have charge based on the foundation he's laid. He's laid out what the needs are, and they still continue, and we must pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have a few words by the Honorable Ming.
I was just bringing a mic. The only thing I'd add to a very incredible occasion, I'm in Young Clyburn, is I guess was passed to me. McKinley Washington was a state commissioner, Employment Security Commission. And I don't know if you know what that means, but I tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean a lot of McKinley Washingtons were there before, and a lot of McKinley Washingtons are currently not there today. And so he was a trailblazer. We talk about the pastoral, we talk about the legislative, but let's not forget that important agency, that Employment Security Commission, which meant a lot and still means a lot for working people in South Carolina. He was the commissioner's trailblazing commissioner. And I just wanted to affirm that a lot of us pattern ourselves when we had the title after him, and we're grateful. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you. At this time, we will now have we'll hear from Jaquetta Jones. Political activist and former judge.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Reverend Washington set the fire to my attempts to move forward in life. He showed up at our house when I was in about 7th grade. He was new to the community, but he seemed to kind of pick out certain people to get his advice from. He'd have a conversation and then he would decide, yes, you can do this. And you might be sitting there going, well, no, I don't have time. Yes, you do. And I got that many times. Reverend Washington was the impetus behind my getting into and staying in banking for as long as it benefited me. I helped keep the Esau Jenkins, well, Sea Island Comprehensive Health Care, but it was originally named the Sea Island Comprehensive, the Esau Jenkins Clinic. That is how healthcare got out to the islands. Reverend Washington had Senator Hollings to walk those communities and see the conditions that people lived in and the things that children had to deal with the worms and that kind of thing. That's how we got water in those communities. And it just made me admire him, admire his courage, admire his strength. But it also scared me about the near-death experiences that man had. And he just took it lightly as being a part of what he had to do in order to get things done. He was supposed to come back to Charleston one night from Walterboro. I think it was with one of the Cantrell brothers, Paul, and something or someone, Phil Noble told him, no, McKinley, I need you to ride back with me because I got this to tell you. Everybody had something to bring to him, something to talk to him about, something to tell him about, because they knew he was going to take it forward, if at all possible. And he didn't get in that plane. And before they could get to Charleston, they found out that Paul Cantrell had died in his plane. You know, it was just so many things that happened to Reverend Washington that did not frighten him. It was like it gave him more of a nudge. The accident he had where he tried to total I-26. You know, he's coming from Orangeburg and ends up in the median and God knows where. I forgot what they said he hit, but he was in the hospital for a good period behind that. And yet, did it frighten him? Not at all. The one thing that frustrated me was when he kept trying to push me into politics. And I kept telling him, I don't want to. Jacotta, we need people like you. No, sir, I'm sorry. I will not be doing that. Well, I think Reverend Washington, you're not listening. You're not listening. Well, guess what? I ended up on Ravenel Town Council. I ended up working on several campaigns for local and national candidates, including Mignon's father. And I ended up, what else was it? I don't know. Oh,
Uh-huh.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
The one experience I wanted to forget, being a magistrate in the town of Ravenel. But I made it through that time. And when it came time for my reappointment, again, the dirty politics got in, and it was, no, she doesn't need to be reappointed. And those Republicans walked in my face and let me know, you will not be reappointed. They didn't know I was going to, ooh, thank you. I just did not let them set my direction because Reverend Washington was already doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll have a performance by Mrs. Washington's nephew, Demetrius Daniel. Made it through. Made it through. Yeah. Really? Really?
All right, 1, 2, testing, 1, 2. One, two, testing, 1, 2. Can you hear me back there? I got to do sound tests. All right, thank you. All right. I always like to start off with like this. How is everyone doing? I feel like I only heard like 2 or 3 people. Like there's nobody in here. I'm gonna ask again. How are you doing today? Wonderful. Let's listen. Give me a shout out there, whatever. Listen. People talk about that was my uncle, right? I don't want to get into too long of an explanation, right? But definitely, he was like, listen. You got to get up out of your seat. You got to be whatever. You got to be enthusiastic, right? You had that voice, right? I'm trying. I'm definitely not him with that voice, but that's what I think about it, hearing all those stories about my uncle. And I'm not going to talk. I could do the same thing, talk about a lot of experience that I definitely had with my uncle. But I think I'm going to put this in a piece that I think he should definitely be included in. And it's simply entitled, Is 1 Month Enough? It's 1 month enough. 400 years. Show us what I feel good. Again, it's the question. It's 1 month enough. It's 1 month enough. 400 years. Show us what I This one. Cold, frigid winter time. That's the question. It's not a simple suggestion. That's the question. Is 1 month enough to lie face down in a musty stank slave ship, shackled in chains, covered in blood and feces, just to get to the so-called new world? That might take you for a twirl. Yes. Is 1 month enough? Is 1 month enough to pick 100 bales of cotton on 40 acres of land with one mule in a hot South Carolina sun? That might not sound like fun. That's the question. It's not a simple suggestion. Is 1 month enough? Is 1 month enough to get hit in the head, have blackouts, take hundreds, perhaps thousands on a railroad underground, chased by news-faring overseers and bloodthirsty hounds that might get you down? Well, that's the question, you know. Is 1 month enough? Is 1 month enough for one woman to get on one bus and take one seat? Some say she had tired feet so that hundreds, perhaps thousands, could walk to work. That might be berserk. Ask the question. It's not a simple suggestion. Hey, is 1 month enough? Come on. I said it's 1 month enough. It's short. It's short with rubber. Is 1 month enough to die first in a Revolutionary War? But what was Christmas adding? What was he really fighting for? I said, it's 1 month enough to design Washington, D.C. and create a clock. Yes, old Benjamin did it. Yes, you know, and that really shouldn't be a shock. I said, it's 1 month enough to realize there's no progress without just a little struggle. And that's what Frederick said, because no skin color in his life, he didn't want to juggle. I said, is 1 month enough to say, like she said, ain't I a troop sojourner, you know, and ain't I a woman? And yes, I should be treated equally like any other wayjourner. I said, is 1 month enough to ask what happens to a dream deferred? Like Langston said, let America be America. Haven't you heard? I said, is 1 month enough? But the Dukes, Queens, Counts, Goddess of Souls. And if you listen carefully, maybe they'll just, it might make you whole. I said, it's a come here. It's 1 month enough. Show us. Is 1 month enough to pay life's dues? Ask Eddie, Buddy, and B.B. King. You know, they even played the blues. I said, is 1 month enough to even run faster than even Hitler's speeches? Because, you know, that's the lesson of Jesse and many others. That's the lesson they teach. Well, is 1 month enough for the revolution not to be televised? And like Gil Scott Heron said, this might just happen right before your eyes. I said, is 1 month enough to realize by any means necessary means by any means necessary? If you're not, maybe you should be scary and racist. You would be wary. I said, but is 1 month enough to be a husband, father, brother, senator, commissioner, representative, pastor? Is 1 month enough? It's 1 month enough. Come on now. Come on, help me out. This one, hear you one more time. It's 1 month enough. Let's send it out, Is 1 month enough to reach the mountaintop? No matter if the bullets top, we'll never stop. And that's what my uncle, that's what it was about. He said, that's what we all should be. Never stop. It's 1 month is not enough. Come on. Thank you. And just remember, it's 1 month enough. Thank you.
All right, well, that concludes our program. You are welcome to make sure you get a book, check out the exhibit. If you've never been to Avery before, you are welcome to see the exhibits on this floor. On the second floor is the history of Avery and an installation by Hank Herring. And the first floor is an exhibit on James Campbell. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask us. Help yourself to some food. We got some to-go boxes. And that's it. Thank you once again.